It's been over 20 years since these events have occurred. I was reluctant to share what happened to me because I didn't feel like arguing against doubt and disbelief and defending my own sanity. In the late 1980s, I was a curious teen. I became fascinated with the occult. As a child growing up in a religious household, my first exposure of occult themes came from the Bible. I always strained to understand my beliefs concerning the teachings of the church, and especially struggled with my own faith in God. After learning that demons were former angels who had rebelled against God and were cast down to the earth and could interact with humans, I came to the conclusion that the best way to prove to myself that God existed was to see if demons existed. There was no internet back then to explore my questions and satisfy my curiosity. Knowledge of the occult was hard to come by and had to be searched for in libraries and bookstores. In time, I collected a small library of books about witchcraft and demonology. Looking back now, I realize how foolish I was. I didn't understand what I was getting myself into. Those books have since been destroyed after what eventually happened to me. I began reading those books and actively trying to invite demons into my life. I read out loud long strings of demonic names out of those books. I would cast spells and draw symbols on my wall and on the floor. Nothing ever happened. I had a few strange dreams, but that wasn't proof of anything. One day I came across a paragraph that told me to get a full clove of garlic and stake it with a large iron nail. This would attract demonic power to a certain place. I did this and put the staked clove deep in my closet. The demons did not come to me suddenly. They came gradually, insidiously working their way into my life and psyche, without me hardly noticing. I woke up more frequently from nightmares, sometimes listening intently, because I could have sworn that what had awoken me was laughter or whispering. I passed these off as dreams. Sometimes I woke up paralyzed for a few seconds. I dismissed this as sleep paralysis. I woke up sometimes with all my sheets on the floor, far from the bed. I awoke some nights thinking, was my bed just moving? And again I would pass this off as restless sleep. Then one night I woke up to watch my hand and arm shoot up from my side, grab the lamp on my night table, and throw it across the room with such force that I pulled my shoulder out of its socket, and the lamp practically exploded against the opposite wall. I sat in the dark, cradling my arm, wondering how I could do such a thing out of a dead sleep. A few nights later I did the same thing with a new lamp, with the same arm. I had to wear a sling to retract movement of the shoulder. A week later, it happened one more time. But I didn't grab the lamp. I tore the sling right off my neck. I thought all these occurrences were very strange, but I still proceeded to invite the demons. I was still not convinced. I was such a fool. I became irritable, and my family started to notice. My parents thought that I might be on drugs. I was brought to a psychologist who tested me, and I was diagnosed with depression. I told no one what I was up to. Over time, the odd occurrences only increased. Late one night, I awoke to the full moon shining on my face, through my bedroom window. I debated sharing this part because it sounds so strange, but I began growling at the moon. I remember not thinking as myself. My thoughts were basic and primal. I began growling more ferociously, until I was practically foaming at the mouth and snapping at the moon like some rabid animal. I eventually snapped out of my trance and started wondering what the hell I was doing. I didn't know yet, but at this point the demons were ready to pounce. They felt they had weakened me enough to extract my soul from my body. These next recollections are the most vivid in my mind. One night I awoke and felt very strange. I felt a jarring disjointedness. Then part of myself lifted out of my feet and then worked up my body until I was floating above the bed. It felt something like if you were to smoothly pull a piece of tape off a flat surface. I was floating above my bed, and I was looking down on myself. I tried to move, but I knew somehow that I would have had to learn how. After being amazed at what was happening, I then felt something grab me by the feet and then started to violently shake me like a rag doll. I felt like a streamer being whipped back and forth. Something was trying to tear me away from a connection that I still had with my body. I was terrified, and I knew that if whatever was doing this to me succeeded, I would die. But the cord, I don't know what else to call it, that was tying me to my body was too strong. They could not break it. They gave up and let go. I then floated lazily up to the ceiling. I remember my cheek resting slightly against the ceiling of my room. I set my eyes on a specific imperfection on the ceiling. I had studied it many times from below, but it was now a few inches away from my face. I remembered thinking how different it looked from up there. Suddenly I was back in bed, looking up at the ceiling where I just was. I was taking in deep breaths, like I needed air. I still felt strange and was paralyzed with fear. I felt my chest getting heavy. I took in a deep breath, but the feeling stayed. Now I felt as if I was being pushed down, but I did not feel any pressure in a specific place. It was as if some invisible weight had been draped over my torso and was only getting heavier. I remember thinking that this was just a dream. There was no way that any of this was actually happening. Then I heard a loud sound that I will never forget. I heard the sound of my bed creaking. I was sinking into the bed, and the sound of the wood warping under the increased weight was real. In a frenzy of fear, I burst out of my bed and ran out of my room. I went to my sister's house, who lived next door, and I woke her up to let me in. I was wide-eyed and hyperventilating. She eventually calmed me down and began asking questions. I didn't tell her about what I had been doing and told her that I saw a ghost. She laughed it off and told me to stay the night if I wanted to. I stayed, but I did not sleep again that night. By the next day, I knew what I had to do. I went back to my house and up to my room. I quickly went to the closet, grabbed the clove of garlic with a staked nail, which was now rotten black. I took it outside. My parents' house is made of stone, and I found the largest open space of the wall that had no windows and threw the clove against the stone. I swear the thing exploded against the wall like I had thrown a grenade. There was nothing left. I threw all the occult materials, objects, and books I had into the wood stove and burned them. I cleaned the symbols off the walls and furniture, and I never slept in that room again. Nothing like what I have told you ever happened to me again. I think whatever demonic entity it was had their one chance, but failed, and they never bothered me again. So, do I now believe in God? I'm still not sure, but I do know that there are malicious entities in this world, and if you invite them into your life, they will gladly come in.
This happened quite a while ago, but it has been bugging me ever since. Therefore, I will share it with you and maybe get some opinions. Last year, around August, I was at my grandparents' house to stay the night, since I don't see them often anymore. Everything was normal that night. We had dinner, joked, and watched TV. I am a night owl, so everyone had gone to bed before me. Around 2:30, I retired to the guest room, which used to be my room a few years ago when we lived with them. I got ready for bed and set up my laptop so that I could have some music as I tried to fall asleep. Now, I'll tell you, when I lived there was a couple of supernatural things that happened, but none of them bad or scary. For example, I am a very light sleeper, and if someone was to even walk on the carpet outside my door, I will hear it and wake up. In that room, however, if it was cold and all the covers were on the floor or the window was open, I would wake up tucked in and the window shut. This time was a different story. In that room, there is a corner where there is a little mini hall before you reach the door. Around 3 AM, I looked towards the place where the wall juts out and saw a horrifying creature. It wasn't completely physical, but almost like something you would see in your mind's eye, if you understand what I mean. I have never seen anything like it. I couldn't tell whether it was supposed to be male or female. It was white with a greyish tinge to the skin. It was extremely bony and the skin was stretched tight and it had little wrinkles everywhere. The body itself was strange as well. It had skinny arms that were extremely long and out of proportion to the normal human body. The fingers were far too long as well. Then I saw the face. Although I knew it was staring at me, I couldn't really see the eyes. Just two black, shadowy pits. The nose wasn't there either, or was not noticeable, but the mouth I could see clearly. I could vaguely see the lips, which were not in any sort of expression. However, something was smeared over its lips and face in a way that resembled a grotesque grin. My guess is that it was blood. The head was covered with wild, medium-length black hair. The creature was sticking out sideways from the wall, just staring at me. Thankfully, my face generally looks apathetic, so I'm assuming I didn't look freaked out. I then proceeded to turn on my music and try to go to sleep. Nothing happened that night. A couple of months later, I was at my friend's apartment, and I was laying on the floor attempting to go to sleep once again. It was also about 3 AM that time as well. Laying on the floor with my eyes open, I saw the creature laying on its stomach, staring at me. I closed my eyes and tried to ignore it. That did not work. Even though my eyes were closed, I could still see it. It was crawling towards me at a rather fast pace until it was only a few inches from my face. Stupidly, I opened my eyes to face it, but when I did, it was gone. I haven't seen it since, and have never seen it in my own house. No, I do not have a history of hallucinations. I do not do drugs, smoke, anything. I rarely even drink alcohol, and don't do rituals of any sorts. I have no explanation for the creature or any definitive proof that it's stalking me. So, what do you think?
This is a story my dad has told me several times regarding his grandfather, my great-grandfather. It's important to know that my great-grandfather Pete was a violent alcoholic and used to beat up my great-grandmother and their kids. He was a very large man. They lived in Ronda, North Carolina during the 1940s. And one night, Pete was leaving a friend's house after a game of poker. And as usual, he was very drunk. It was quite late at night, probably around midnight, and he chose to cut through the meadows to get home. Now, if you can picture this, there is the meadow, and to the left of him is a hill, and the moon is bright, so it illuminated the entire area he was walking through. He happened to look up to the left, and saw what looked like a dark silhouette of a man. Pete was extremely confused by this, considering how late it was. He decided to ignore it and continue on his way. However, as he walked, the figure kept stride with him, moving in the same direction he was going. By the light of the moon, Pete later said he could have sworn that the strange man had a long, thin tail and horns on its head. Bewildered, he watched in horror as the figure went down on all fours and began moving towards him like an animal. Of course, by that time he was questioning his drunken state of mind, but he was way too alert and nervous to be imagining all of this. He started to pick up the pace and noticed that as he did, the thing did too. When he made it to the house, the first thing he did was immediately free his 2 bulldogs from their pen. They ran out into the night, after whatever the thing was, and in just a few seconds, they turned right around and ran back directly into the house. My great-grandmother said those dogs were so spooked, they slid right up to the fireplace and burnt their fur without even realizing it. At this point, my great-grandfather was pissed off at whatever the thing was, so he pulled off a piece of tin from their roof and walked up to the gate, and just before he threw it, he described how he saw 2 red bulging eyes looking at him from the road. He threw the tin sheet at it, and it disappeared. He wasn't sure if it ran off or just vanished. but it was gone. My great-grandmother was very religious, and she warned him that it had been the devil coming after him, and he had to change his ways. Naturally, she said, he didn't change at all, but it did scare the hell out of him. I can tell you that this story has been told by just about everyone on my grandmother's side. They said that they were confused about what was going on, but they had never seen their father go so white in the face like he did that night. This story fascinates me and scares me all at once, knowing that if the devil is real, he could easily be stalking you anywhere, in a crowd or an empty street, without you ever knowing.
There's always a reason to be afraid.